All right, all set. All right, it's my pleasure to welcome Mike Ketcham here into the interview room. Mike is an amateur who qualified at Santa Fe, New Mexico in the qualifier. And Mike, your University of Arizona's Senior Associate Athletic Director. You supervise basketball and a number of other functions there. You know, what are some of the challenges that you faced in the past year given what happened with COVID? You know, obviously we in the golf industry faced some shutdowns with competition. But you had a lot of that and dealing with a lot of that at a major college program. What was the last year like?
Yeah, very difficult in a lot of ways. When you service and have over 500 student athletes, and I think the thing that was the most difficult was it seemed like every week things were changing, the rules and the guidelines when we thought we had a plan for the next week, following week in terms of testing protocols, and the CDC, the health and local state department would come back and change. But we got through it. It's amazing. 18 to 22-year-old kids are extremely resilient, and they just wanted an opportunity to play, practice, and compete. And as a department in the Pac-12 conference, the NCAA, we got through it, and hopefully the most difficult part is behind us moving forward.
Now, you've coached college golf at a few different places in your career. What have you learned from coaching some really talented amateur players that you're able to bring over to your own game and playing competitive golf?
Sure. So I played college golf myself back in the early to mid 80s, played at the University of Arkansas, played professionally for about 2.5, 3 years, played the Asian Tour, and always knew I wanted to get into coaching. And had the opportunity at a junior college in 93 and 94 and started at Scottsdale Community College, left there, went to San Jose State, was there a few years, went to Oregon State, was there 5 years, went back to my alma mater, the University of Arkansas, for 5 years. And certainly to your question, had an opportunity to be around some fantastic young men and some kids that could play at the elite level. Even though maybe I wasn't playing and practicing as much as one would want when I was playing full time, I was still around it. I was mentally engaged. I was watching, and it became obviously less about me and more about our student athletes being able to compete on a high level. And mentally that was stimulating, and there were times I were able to hit golf balls and play with them at times, and it certainly kept my golf game fresh.
Now, we hear a lot about golf's longest day at the U.S. Open, the 36-hole qualifier. Right. It's sectional after getting through local, but it can be pretty grueling at other USGA championships as well. What was the qualifying process like for you, knowing that it's just a lot of players for a few spots to try and get into the U.S. Senior Open?
Right. The thing you try to do in a situation like that is you try to prepare yourself the best going in. And certainly at my age now, at 56 years old, it's just as much physical as it is mental, and actually practicing and preparing for the game. You have to nutrition, eat correctly. You have to work out if you're really serious about it. And about 3-4 years ago, I made a commitment that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to become competitive again in this game. And going to Santa Fe, I felt like I was in good shape, a good mental frame of mind. I felt like my golf game was in good shape. And Santa Fe, like this golf course, might not be quite as hilly, but it's a desert golf course and long distances between greens and tees with a little bit of hills as well.
And you had a pretty nice finish there, if I recollect, to get in. It was 17 and 18, right?
Yeah, thank you. I was probably 2/3 of the way back. My wife and a couple of friends were following, and obviously today with technology, you can kind of see where you are in terms of the scoreboard and the leaderboard through Genesis. And about hole 14 or 15, I was even par and playing well, and asked my wife, what does it look like? And she says, well, do you want to know? I said, honey, I wouldn't ask you if I didn't want to know. So she looked at the board or on the phone, and I was 2 back. There were 2 guys in at 2 under, and I knew I had to basically play the last 3 or 4 holes 2 under to have an opportunity to go into a playoff. 17 was a downwind par 5 uphill. Luckily hit it up there about 5 feet from about 230 out, made the putt, and then your mind changes. Okay, I didn't have the mind frame, let's just make par to get into the playoff. Let's try to make birdie. And hit a good drive down the middle of the fairway, only had about 135 in. But if you remember correctly, the wind and the weather that particular day at Santa Fe was not conducive to playing great golf, or low scoring, I should say. And I hit this wedge shot in there. It was in a little bit of a bowl area. When I left the club, I thought, this is pretty good. But it landed on the downslope of the front of the bowl about 15 feet, and it shot straight up the hill in the back of the green. Now I'm standing here going, am I going to chip this thing? Am I going to putt this thing? Dead downhill. Saving grace was I had about a 25-mile-an-hour wind back in my face, and somehow I got it down there about 3 feet and made the putt and went into the playoff.
Very good. Well, it's great to have you in the championship. And
thank you.
Now that you're here, what are kind of some of the goals and expectations you have this week, and how would you quantify success?
Sure. Well, obviously the primary goal in someone in my situation is to make the cut. And I want to play well. I have secondary goals on top of that I'll keep to myself. But right now you want to put yourself in position, keep it around par the first 2 days, hopefully, and be in a good position going into the weekend. You know, the U.S. Open, this is my first Open. I played in one U.S. Junior growing up. I played in 2 U.S. Amateurs. I played in one in '85, and I played in one in '97. '85 was out in Montclair, New Jersey. '97 was at Cog Hill. Was fortunate enough to make it into match play in both of those events. And this is very similar in terms of setup, especially to Cog Hill in '97. 2 things you have to do well in an Open, and that is you have to drive the ball in the fairway, and you have to putt and chip well. You have to chip it well out of the cabbage. And you know, a U.S. Open, a U.S. Amateur, a U.S. Junior, if you're not prepared, it will expose any weakness you have.
Finally, for me, you live in Arizona but have some family from Iowa just across the border. Who's out here this week following you, supporting you, family and friends?
Sure. So obviously my wife, who is my rock star, and you talk about a coach's wife. She's been around it. We started dating at 16 years old, and she's seen a lot of great shots. She's seen a lot of mediocre shots, and she's seen a lot of bad shots. And she is, when I started coaching, I mentioned it before, a coach's wife. She'll be out here forefront, and she's really doing a good job. And I'll get to your question here in a second, because it's easy when you grow up across the river in Iowa and you have so many family and friends that are going to be here, there's a lot of distractions. And she has really taken that burden and said, Mike, you go play golf, you focus on it, I'll take care of everything else. But in terms of family, my mother and father, who reside in Arizona, they're both 80 years old, they're here. My two children, our daughter 27 will be here tomorrow flying in from Cleveland. My son Michael came with my mom and dad and my wife today, as well as some really good friends from Tucson. And then my mother, I should say my wife's mother, my mother-in-law still lives in Ottumwa, and her extended family lives all throughout Iowa, and most of them will be here on Thursday morning.
That's awesome. Brian?
Yeah, today you got to play with some USGA champions. I believe Roger Chapman and Retief Goosen, and I don't know who else you played with yesterday, but can you tell us about that experience?
Sure. So yesterday I had the opportunity to play with Bernard Langer, and obviously what I wanted to do to going into this championship is I wanted to play with guys that have won not only at this level, but maybe have won majors, and it's unique, and it's really a neat experience for us amateurs that don't have a chance to play with those guys very often. When you show up, to be able to put your name in a practice round or an open spot. And you know, I wanted to spend the time with these guys watching how they prepare, maybe picking their brain a little bit. Bernard Langer yesterday, Retief Goosen today, Rich Beam today, who won the PGA. They were so cordial and so nice, and they could have, you know, an amateur from Arizona that hasn't had a lot of success on the professional level kind of do their thing, but they were incredibly inviting, phenomenal men, and I thank all 3 of them for spending the time with me.
Could this experience also lead to possibly playing in more, not only USGA events, but other events, especially since you're eligible at your age? Not that you're old, but
Sure.
golf's forever.
Yeah,
it seems
so,
like.
so when I turned 50, 6 years ago, I was not playing a lot of golf. I had just started this new role and new position at the University of Arizona, and it requires a lot of travel in my job. And I'd say in the last 4 years, I've really kind of figured out how and the time of the year that I really can focus on my golf game. And I knew 55 was also a big number in amateur golf too because of the U.S. Senior Amateur. And when I really got started 4 years ago, getting back into the competitive spirit, the competitive mode, taking care of my body, that was really my number one goal. And I tried to qualify for the U.S. Open 2 years ago at Los Campanas in Santa Fe. And I was really close to making it. I had a train wreck on the 6th hole, a par 3, no water, no hazard, and ended up missing it by 2 shots. And I walked away going, I can do this, and I will make this at some point here in the near future. Well, the pandemic hits, so we didn't have the qualifying in last year in 2020. And then back to my point, the U.S. Senior Amateur, they didn't have the qualifying. I don't even think they had the event last year. So hopefully I can play well enough here the next few days. I won't have to go through the qualifying here coming up in a few weeks. But those were really the 2 motivating factors that has put me in the position of wanting to get back, practice, and be competitive again.
And when you say your title at the University of Arizona, most folks really don't know what that means. So can you give us maybe two of the 3 things that you do the most every day?
Sure.
And people don't realize it's probably a 7-day-a-week job.
Yeah, it can be. With overseeing basketball, I'm on the road. I travel 100% with them. Have done it for the last 6-7 years. And so the wintertime, which is actually ideal in Arizona to play golf, I'm not touching a golf club. The rest of the year, I can get out on the weekends. I can get out after work. But to your point, what do? I'm a senior associate athletics director. I oversee our men's basketball, our men's and women's golf team. I oversee our equipment room and have a huge role in our fundraising aspect in the development office as well. So it is a busy job. I'm basically one of 4 or 5 lieutenants underneath our athletics director.
Sure. And then you talked about being around competitive athletes all the time. Is there 1 or 2 experiences in your work life that kind of ignited that flame where you wanted to be a competitive golfer again?
I don't know if it was one particular instance or one particular person, but coaching college golf, being in athletic administration, if you look at the schools I've been at, I've been around some pretty phenomenal people. Everybody from Dennis Erickson, the football coach at Oregon State, Miami Hurricanes, to Rich Rodriguez at Arizona, to Sean Miller, the basketball coach, to now Jed Fish at Arizona, to Tommy Lloyd, and just the opportunity to be around these people and watch them coach and expect and get the most out of these student athletes, and you take that and you apply it to yourself. And basically it was the same thing that I did when I coached too, trying to be able to make these kids elite and get them to perform at the best of their ability.
You probably you've mentioned how many coaches you've worked with, but have you seen a common thread with the ones that are successful?
Yeah, they're workaholics, and they don't sleep. It's amazing. I don't know when they have downtime. They make a lot of money, but they never spend it because they're never going anywhere. They're never going on vacations with families. It's amazing what they put into it. And I know a lot of people that aren't in college athletics thinks these guys are overpaid, but the impact that they can have on a school, an economy in your town, your community, your state, it's astronomical.
Right. That's good for me.
Okay.
Mike, thanks so much.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
Thank
Have
you.
a great week.
Thank you.
Hope that was all right.